Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, an overview of business immigration in Canada and how co-counseling can work for you. How is everybody doing? Where are people located? We wanna hear from you. Welcome, Vancouver, Toronto, Richmond Hill, Ontario. Wonderful. I'm very excited about our topic for today because we're not only going to cover business immigration and co-counseling, but we have the very fortunate opportunity of listening to our own Phil Mooney talk about latest developments, current news, what's happening with the strike, how's that going to be impacting business immigration in Canada. Some rumors about the startup visa. Is it going to be if it's going to be going into moratorium or not? A little bit of a recap of ethical practices that are always great, and of course, learning about business immigration, the different options, how to choose them, and then finally also covering the option of co-counseling. And yes, I think it's going to be really fun. We're really excited. Right now we have 74 people already logged in, so I'm going to be starting very soon. I'm going to be doing a very fast introduction today because we wanna cover a lot of topics. Okay, so welcome everyone. I see a lot of familiar names. Okay. So for all of you who are here, keep in mind that you will receive the recording once the event ends. You will be receiving that on your email. We will also be sharing Phil's information so that you can reach out to him directly. And if you have questions, please go to the questions tab on the right-hand side and add the questions there. And we would be doing the Q&A session at the end, as usual. Let me see. Okay, and the questions that you also included once you registered, we're going to try to cover that as much as possible. Okay. Okay. So 1 second. Let's get started. An overview of business immigration in Canada and how co-counseling can work for you. Let's get started. Good day, everyone. I'm going to be quick on my intro today because we have many topics to touch on and little time. I'm Marianela Mansour, and on behalf of Joorney Business Plans Canada, we are thrilled to have Phil Mooney as our guest speaker today, the man who needs no introduction. When you say Phil in Canada, you mean Phil Mooney, the one and only. With over 30 years of experience in sales, management, marketing, and strategic planning in the corporate world, Phil has transitioned into the world of immigration consultancy, where he has been practicing for the past 24 years. Phil's experience in the field is unparalleled, having served as the president of CAPIC from 2007 to 2010, and as the first CEO and president of the ICCRC from 2011 to 2012. Additionally, he has also served as an ICCRC director from 2013 to 2015. Currently, Phil serves as a co-counsel on business immigration cases. We are honored to have him speak to us today and share his insights about current events, latest developments, overviews on business immigration, and co-counseling. Please join me in welcoming Phil Mooney to our webinar. Hi, Phil.
Thanks very much. Hi, Marianela. Thank you very much for the introduction. The good news is you don't have to look at me this whole time. We'll be able to share our presentation. I don't have it up in front of me. How do I make sure we have it?
Let me ask the team to upload
here
it.
it is.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. That's great. My wish is a command almost.
Take it away, Phil.
Thanks again for the introduction. I always wish I could not have the part about my experience, because when you start adding up the years, it's a polite way of saying, well, we have an old guy here. And that's true, okay? But I guess with age comes experience, and with experience comes, let's say, knowledge. And sometimes the best things you learn are by making mistakes. And so the other way to look at it is experience means somebody who's made more mistakes than you have. Okay, and hopefully has learned from them. So let's get started with the presentation. Just a couple of quick points about, let's say, call it housekeeping. I know many of you who have put your questions online. Everyone else who's joined up, you probably have a question in your mind. That's why you're taking your valuable time to spend today. And you probably came in thinking, what do I do? You know, I want to make sure I get my question asked, right? And you're going to be looking and looking for an opportunity to ask that question. And unfortunately, what happens is you tend to miss some of the presentation or all of it, hoping to get your question answered. Well, my suggestion to you is make sure you write down your questions now. If you haven't already submitted them, put them on the question form or write them on a piece of paper. I promise you that we will answer every single question, okay? If it's not done today during the presentation, Marianella will email me any and all questions that weren't answered, and I'll come back to you within the next few days, okay, with my own answer to those questions best I can. So the presentation, I think from looking at the questions submitted, will cover about 90% of them. There's a few specifics that you know, we may be able to get into on a couple of the other questions, okay? So let's start going forward. Don't have to look at that one. That was more on who I am. So basically, what can you expect from today's session? Well, we're going to have an update on recent events, like what's going on with C11, SUVs, LMIAs for owner-operator, new lines of business, special programs, and the strike. Okay. We'll go and take a quick look at the business immigration processes. We do seminars on business immigration, and they can take up to 3 hours because there's 25 or more programs. The idea here is, how do you get started with a client on a business immigration, and what are the options going forward, and which ones are the most important, okay? We'll also give you some productivity tips on how to deal with a business immigrant question without spending hours and hours and hours trying to figure things out before you even have a client. We're also going to take a look and say co-counseling, and we'll give you the details on how you can access co-counseling, which is an important part of anyone's practice in terms of expanding it or growing it. And then we'll talk about tips on practicing ethically. Unfortunately, a lot of knowledge about ethics is very hard to come by, and we'll talk about them and how they apply to you in your practice. Okay, so let's talk about some of the latest events. First of all, the strike. Everybody's talking about the strike. Unfortunately, what happened to my... Sorry, can you still see the presentation, Marianella?
Phil, do you prefer we put the presentation up or permanently?
Yes.
Or okay, perfect.
Yeah, if you can
Let's
put
do
it up
that.
permanently, and then if I can advance the slides, I can. Otherwise, I'll let you know. Okay.
Yes, you can.
So,
okay, thank you, Phil.
I like to think we've added a new question to the worst questions of all time. You know what the worst questions are. You know, the worst one is when you're starting out on a 6-hour trip with 3 kids in the back seat, and after 10 minutes, the first one says, you know, are we there yet? Okay. That's question number 1. I consider to be one of the worst questions of all time. It has no answer. Number 2 is, for immigration consultants especially, it's the question every client asks you at some point, and it says, how long will this process take? Again, there is no answer to that question, right? It's basically you're asking how high is up. And now the third most unanswerable question is, how long will the strike last? Okay, so the simple answer is, we have no idea, right? What's more important is, what are you going to do for your clients during the strike? We now know that, for example, while most immigration offices in Canada and most workers in Canada are on strike, the visa officers are not in the overseas visa posts. And that might suggest to you that, wow, great, that means if I file my visitor application or work permit application in Delhi or London, it should be processed as normal. Well, unfortunately, that's not what's happening, right? And the reason for that is, those are all resources that are available to the minister and the department management, and they're going to direct those resources where they think they're needed the most. So if the strike continues, you're going to see visa officers everywhere working on refugee cases for Sudan, or on processing work permits and visitor permits for Ukrainian refugees. They're going to be working on areas that the government thinks will give them the most benefit. So they may not necessarily work on some of your applications that are filed there. Right? That's number one. Number two, know which processes are definitely affected. And you need to go through every application you're thinking of submitting and saying, how is this processed? Even TRV applications or work permit applications submitted online don't necessarily go to a visa office right away. We know that 70 or 80% of applications that are submitted for temporary status go probably to Edmonton or Ottawa. And if the, for simple things like an R10 check, are the fees paid? And if whoever is doing that isn't a computer, and those people are doing that in Canada, it's going to delay every file. Okay. So again, the simple answer is we don't know any of the effects. But the best idea is to make sure your clients understand there's a problem. Okay. Let them know up front there's a problem. At the same time, keep filing. Because when the strike is over, sooner or later, they're going to start looking at applications again, and they're going to prioritize them in the order they're received. And if you hold back on your applications because you're busy, maybe you're taking this as a break. You don't have to file an application because it's not going to be processed. So you go to another kind of a file, and you're doing other things, and you hold back on processing the client's applications that aren't going to get processed. Well, as soon as the strike is over, everyone who's doing the same thing is going to file. And that means you could be way down the line and, for your clients. So my suggestion is file applications as you get them in. Okay. That's the most important part. Now, I know I said that the hardest question is how long will this last? I did notice in the news yesterday, there were some positive developments in that the government announced the areas of contention, if you will, with the union. And I see two possible courses of action. They've narrowed it down to 4 key issues, and we're seeing some sign of bending between the union and the government on all 4 of those issues. So there is no one stake in the sand, and the good news is it's not about wages. They seem to have settled on a reasonable compromise there. So the other issues, you can check them out. There's some good articles in the CBC and on the Globe and Mail. You check out what those are if you're interested. But I believe they may well come to a settlement on those ideas within the next few weeks, at the most. The other option is the union has talked about becoming more aggressive, and we know that if they get very aggressive and if there are disruptions that affect Canada's economy, Parliament can legislate them back to work. And they don't want to do that. I mean, you've got a minority government supported by the NDP who will never agree to it. So you're now going to have to get the Conservatives and the Liberals agreeing on ending the strike through legislation. So either way, that says to me 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But please remember, I'm contradicting myself. There is no way to know. Okay. Oh, sorry, we got somehow triggered the advancement of the slides. Okay. So that's the strike. C11s. I know there was a question asked about how do you tell the difference between a C11 and a C10? Well, the government in November made that answer very easy. The bottom line is there is no C11 for work permits for business anymore. Okay. I know that sounds drastic, but the simple truth is a C11 work permit now goes to an athlete, to an artist, or to a very short-term business, such as setting up a kiosk at the local exhibition that you have in your city, the CNE, the PNE, the Calgary Stampede, or you're doing a fishing camp for 2 or 3 months. At least now we know if we're going to get work permits for those people, you can go for C11. Anyone who has a C11 application that was submitted any time in the last 6 months needs to think about the fact that when the officers get to it, they're going to say no, especially if it's for a business that's going to continue operating. And you can see that on just go into the IRCC website, go to self-employed, look at the conditions now, and go to the LMI exempt categories and click on self-employed, okay, and see what the rules are. You will see clearly there is no room now. No visa officer or CBSA officer is going to see that C11 is possible for someone opening up a pizza restaurant or opening a franchise, etc. So you now, and basically what they're doing is they're forcing you to go to C10. And if you are going to go to C10, you have to be really careful because the rules for C10 are much different from C11. Okay, they don't involve, and not always involve, self-employed, and they usually require a much more significant economic or cultural benefit. Okay, but that's what the government wants to do. And again, the C11 category was being oversubscribed, in my opinion, and for small businesses, and visa officers were finding it really difficult to determine whether this was a real opportunity or whether someone was just using this to get permanent residence, which is against the rules. Okay. SUVs, it's become a big piece of business for all of us. But as we know, there are problems in the program with processing. We did learn a few months ago that there are something like 14,000 individuals in the backlog right now, and these are individual people in the backlog. And if you take a look at the number of people per SUV application, that maybe is like 5,000 applications. Now, if every resource IRCC was using was going to go towards processing that, it wouldn't take them long, right? But last year they processed 500. Now the target this year is 3,500. The problem is, how are they going to move from 500 to 3,500? And especially now with a strike. I don't know how they will get the resources to improve that much. And their target in 2 years, I think, is 8,500. So the story and what people have been thinking is, well, what if they just stop the intake? Well, as immigration consultants, we all know that the government can stop any program at any time. They and basically return the applications. In 2010, they returned over 100,000 federal skilled worker applications. In 2014, they returned something like 25,000 investor applications. So we're at the mercy of the department and the government saying, yeah, that program's good. We know that you've got your clients. We know that they've spent a lot of money with you paying you to submit these files, but we don't want to do them anymore. And we have the authority to say no. Okay. Very much like saying that if you're watching a hockey game and there's a minute left and the one team's leading 6-0 and the referees come along and say, hey, low score wins. Okay, it's just not Canadian in our opinion, but it doesn't mean the IRCC won't do it. So we wanted to talk to some senior designated organizations and ask them what did they think of this, and because they're the ones most affected. I mean, many of these designated organizations have now been appointed by the government. They've been empowered by the government to make decisions. They've invested time and money and effort in setting up their infrastructures for this, and some of them, it's their entire business. If the government came along and said, okay, like they've done with the Quebec Investor Program, 12 months, okay, we're going to stop this for 12 months until we get everything right. Well, how in the world would any designated organization or angel investor, how would they deal with that when they've already been charging people money to help show them how to start up their businesses, et cetera? How would any consultant or lawyer who's signed up clients, receive nice deposits, put their applications in, to get, or somewhere in, they're all somewhere in the process? Well, it would be a disaster for everyone. So the good news we've heard from these organizations talking with the department and the minister was that they're not going to put in a moratorium, okay? But what they are going to do is start enforcing the law, all right? Not just enforcing the law. Let me back up a minute. The SUV program has some of the simplest requirements of any immigration program. I mean, first you convince a designated organization to approve your project, okay? And yes, the projects have to be innovative and they have to be globally scalable, but that's not up to IRCC to determine that. That's the designated organization. And there are some that have very demanding standards, others don't. And we all know that some of them are basically selling approvals. So getting that letter of support from a designated organization or an angel investor is not that hard. The problem is, what do you do and what do you have to do after that? Okay. So if you want to know what the government's going to do, you need to look at R89. Okay. I'm not going to put up R89 here because I want you all to look it up. Okay. But fundamentally it says that if you're going to qualify for an SUV permanent residence, they're going to look to make sure that everything you've done since getting your letter of authorization is geared towards starting up an innovative business and working with it. If you do anything in the time period between when you file your permanent residence application and when you are evaluated by IRCC, which can now be 3 to 4 years because of the backlog. If you do anything that looks like you're intending to become a permanent resident, you'll be refused. Okay? And how do you tell the difference? Well, the only way I know to tell the difference is to make sure that your clients know the minute they get their letter of acceptance, they need to make every possible effort to start the business as soon as possible. That means applying for work permits. And you get work permits if you get a certificate from the designated organization. So you have to identify your essential, if you have a group of 2, 3, 4, 5, you have to identify your essential person. You should be filing for work permits for them right away. Don't listen to your clients if they say, well, I know we don't have to come to Canada until we're permanent residents. That's incorrect. If they wait to come to Canada, 3 years and they haven't even started their business, they're going to fail, right? They will be refused. They will go to peer review or be refused outright by the officers who have now been instructed by the department to look for sincere, real business development of a business after those individuals get their letter of acceptance. All right? If you just come to Canada and incorporate a business, and somewhere along the line you decide your innovation isn't going to work, so you flip it over, and we've seen people, go and open a variety store or something, and put out $25,000 to get a franchise on something just so they can keep their business operating, thinking that'll be good enough. Well, it won't be. Okay. Anyone who has an SUV client or is thinking of an SUV client needs to make sure they understand they must activate their business. They must report their progress every 6 months now to IRCC. They have to show that for all, and the individuals who are involved, who are considered to be essential, must get work permits, come to Canada and start working in the business. And by the way, another thing that was cleared up was if 1 out of 5 people in that group is a determined essential and you've got them a work permit because they want to come to Canada, if anyone drops out of the project, it's dead. Everyone is refused. And as you know, if anyone comes along and says one of the 5 parties who's essential, got a DUI, if anyone is refused, all 5 will be refused. So your obligation as an authorized representative, you have to make sure on any SUV application that you know everything about everyone. All right. I know many of you have had contacts from designated organizations saying, we've given out a letter of support. Can you just do the PR file? Okay. And it's like, well, it's easy. It's really simple. We all do PR files. You know how to do them. You prove LICO and you make sure they're criminally admissible and, all the regular stuff. You fill in the forms and you send it in. Okay. Real easy. Okay. No big deal. The bad news is you're now going to be spending a lot of time on that file. And by the way, if you don't provide this advice to your clients for whom you just filled in the forms and they get refused, guess who's going to blame you? These people who you filled the forms in for. They're your clients. When they don't get permanent residence after 3 years of waiting, they're going to come to you. And there'll be business people who actually have the money to do it. Okay. So anyone who's been doing SUV files, make sure your clients, even if you've taken all your fees, make sure they know they're going to have to require much more input to the government while they're waiting. Make sure there are things they can and can't do, and make sure they're following through on their commitments to get the business up and running. This is especially difficult when you realize that innovation, it's one thing, and it's a hard thing to start a business in another country. Innovators, even Canadian innovators, are going to fail 9 times out of 10. And if they fail in their business, they're going to lose permanent residence. Okay, they will never be issued permanent residence. Okay. So that's a bit of the update in terms of the SUV programs. Again, there's been such a huge demand, okay, that many people are saying, and there's substantial fees that can be earned with this business, but this is not an easy way to come to Canada. It has the simplest basic requirements and will be the hardest program to qualify of any immigration program. Okay, and again, that's because of the processing times. Okay, a couple of other recent developments. ICTs, there are 2 types of ICTs. One is 204 for treaty individuals under our free trade agreements, and R205, which is significant benefit. In the past, we really didn't make much of a difference when we're filing either application. And that's because R205 says it's an ICT with a significant benefit to Canada added into the requirements. But that significant benefit, we used to be able to say the executive coming to start up the business has all of this experience, and we'll be hiring a few people. It was just a paragraph in the cover letter that you would add. Now they're getting much tighter. They're basically saying if you're going to be doing an ICT for a non-treaty country, basically anything under GATS, funny part is if they're not part of GATS, they can still apply for an ICT, even if they're from a country that has no trade agreements and is not a member of the World Trade Organization. You can still apply for an ICT. It's just that the significant benefit portion of that is going to have to be much tighter. So for Joorney on the business plan side, that has to be a major requirement, okay, in terms of your business plan. It's business plans evolve and the requirements evolve. And where it used to be that, you want to make sure you had an COVID impact on the business, I don't believe that's important anymore in a business plan, but definitely significant benefit for an R205. And just so you can't put in your business plan, this is in support of an R205, okay? And I'll tell you why in a few minutes. You just need to make sure you include a significant benefit to Canada as a real portion, and you can't use the word significant benefit. How's that? All right, but it should be obvious to the officer there is a real benefit there. Okay, they'll be looking for it. We've even had port of entry officers now who had always processed ICTs on flagpoling, now saying we don't know how to evaluate SUVs anymore or significant benefits anymore. So anything with C10 and ICT from R205, we need you to file that online. Okay. LMIs for business purchase. I don't know, I get asked this question. It's 2 years now since the government said no more owner-operator LMIA. Well, they said that, but that's not what happened. Okay. All they did was said an owner-operator LMIA is now a regular LMIA. There's no requirement that you own 50% of the business. You do have to advertise, but it's going to be treated like any other LMIA. And we've continued to have clients come in, and we filed LMIAs for individuals who are buying a business, and we've included the purchase of the business in the advertising requirement, and they've been approved. Some of them have actually already are now permanent residents. So you can forget about or saying that there are no more owner-operators LMIAs. I mean, don't use the wording in your language, because an officer at ESDC might say, oh, they're trying to do something here. It's just an LMIA. Now, there are some techniques for how you do this, and you are at the mercy of an ESDC officer interpreting the rules differently. In the early days of this happening, we had a few officers say, no, you can't file this. We've killed this program. Well, that's not true. You didn't kill the program. You changed the requirements. Ironically, ESDC did that in the hope that the program would go away, because they've never liked it to begin with. RCIC made ESDC develop the owner-operator program because they were getting too many C10s. Well, guess what? Now they're getting lots more C10s, okay? And they're having trouble with that. And it's a conundrum between the two. Our job is to put in the best program for our applicants. Again, a few other tips. You can't do an LMIA for a new company. Your company must have 3 or 4 months, at least, of payroll records and business and clients, okay? Because, again, ESDC is concerned that hiring a foreign worker, there has to be a place for them to work. And if you haven't started your operation yet, there's no place for them to work. It's as simple as that. So they say that you must be actively involved, or the business must be actively involved, actively engaged in the market. Right? And that's not something we've been able to get around in terms of any kind of court issue. So the bottom line here is make sure that you are properly supporting the LMIA. What we tend to do is you put in your job bank ad for a CEO, and let's say they have to invest $500,000 in the business. On the job bank, you can't put in the $500,000. Okay, there's no option for it. So instead, what the job bank will do is they will look through their whole database and they will send you matches. Well, what's been happening for the last year or so is there are no matches. They don't have people looking for a CEO job on the job bank in almost every area. The second thing is when you run I'll show my age. I'll call them print ads. All right, they're typically with Indeed or other companies. What you do is you run two sets of ads. One ad is everything about the job, the range of pay, et cetera, but you don't put in an investment requirement. You then run a second ad where you do put in the investment requirement. If when you take a look at the ad results and nobody is applying, okay, which can happen for these kinds of jobs, well, then that's the ad you use to support your application, and ESDC has no argument with that. If you do get people who are qualified, but they are not prepared to invest $500,000 or whatever the amount is, then you go with the ad that has the advertising requirement, the investment requirement, and you file your application with an ESDC office. Now, what's going to happen with those, almost all of them get approved. There are a few times we know for a fact that when you file in support of permanent resident, those applications go to St. John, New Brunswick. They have about 5 officers there, and 2 of those officers refuse to approve them. They don't want people investing small amounts of money and getting permanent residence automatically, which, as you know, the 200 points is when I'm talking with clients, I say that's the fountain of youth. Immigration considers youth to be, or young, in order to get maximum points, to be 20 to 29. I have grandkids that age, okay? So losing all of your age points at 45 is a real discouraging thing to most people. And what you have to tell them is that it has nothing whatsoever to do with your age, whether you're healthier, whether you're better educated or nicer to look at. It has everything to do with the fact that Canada needs taxpayers to be able to pay taxes for a lot of years to make up for all those people my age who are going to be a burden on society. Okay, so I hope they keep getting a lot of young people in. That's demographics and the baby boomer issue. You can tell your clients it has nothing to do with them not being the fact that they've got a PhD, they speak perfect English, they've got a lot of money, yet they can't qualify for express entry. Well, the 200 points you get with the LMIA gives you, it's the fountain of youth. I tried it. It doesn't really work for me, but unfortunately, it will work for your clients as far as qualifying for express entry. Okay, so that the LMIA issue. Processing times are changing, but remain completely unpredictable. Yeah, wouldn't you know, we start hearing reports that TRVs and work permits through Delhi are being processed now in weeks instead of months, and they go on strike. Okay, now Delhi's still open, but we don't know what they're doing with their time. We've seen a marked improvement in processing times for these from some countries, but we're also continuing to see a lot of problems. Okay, so don't promise anything on processing times. Like I said, that's the second worst question in the world. How long will it take? Don't answer that question. Explain to people, that's your opportunity to explain to people how bad the processing system has become, and that this is worse than any other country in the world. Canada had a massive immigration program with massive processing system that was completely shut down in 2020, and all the pieces were thrown up in the air and broke apart. And just when they started putting them all back together again, they opened the doors, and now demand is 2 and 3 times what it was before COVID. Okay, so make sure you know that things are going to be unpredictable and processing times are unpredictable, and let your clients know that at the start. We'd heard a lot about the express entry system changing to a National Occupation Code. It was supposed to come in January. They have the laws to support it. Then I heard March. Now we're hearing summer, fall. My recommendation to you is whoever you're dealing with, if they are able to get into the pool because they have the education and the language requirement met, put their profiles in. Look what happened 2 years ago with the CEC, where they dropped the pass mark to 70, and they still didn't get enough people. When they start doing this, when they identify the occupations, we can guess at what they're going to be, but we don't know. So whoever is in management, whoever's in a skilled occupation that might be good, get them in the pool. Even if they tell you, hey, they selected at 480 points, why am I going in at 240? Tell them just to get in the pool, because when they do come along, if they happen to be in one of the occupations selected, and they start selecting only those occupations, the pass mark could well drop. substantially in those areas. And that you'll basically get a one-time shot at this, because if you're in the pool, you'll benefit. If you're not in the pool, and when all of us see that, everybody's going to start putting people into the pool, and the pass mark will go back up again. So just get them in the pool. All right, that's a recommendation that we give to all of our clients these days. A few more developments. We have these amazing programs now for Iranian, Ukrainian people in Canada under temporary residents can now apply for work permits. Yes, it's a great thing. It's humanitarian. By the way, it saves Canada from processing tens of thousands of refugees. Okay, because in the past, when there was a crisis around the world, that's how people had to come to Canada, and for Canada to offer relief. We've now been able to offer relief to almost 10 times as many people from the Ukraine and from Iran, simply by saying, okay, we'll give you an open work permit. And you don't have to file for refugee status. Well, anybody who's interested in business immigration, they can use that open work permit to start a business. Once they start and are successful in that business, we can transition them to permanent residence through available programs, because that's what the government, and that's why they did it this way anyway. They want individuals in Canada from Ukraine, for example, many of whom they know will simply go back to the Ukraine when hopefully the war is over. Okay, those who want to stay, some will get married to Canadians, some will start businesses, some will qualify for PNP, some will improve their English to qualify through express entry. Well, again, business programs. The good news is, with an open work permit, you can start a business, okay, and you can work in that business right away. So that's an opportunity. Again, processing problems continue. This is a little different from the processing times. And one of the best examples was in Richard Curlin's Lexbase notes, where he talked about a case last year where the immigration department, how we're supposed to use the case inquiry system, the emergency call, or the call center doesn't work, emails don't work, the case management stuff doesn't work. You're supposed to use the case process, case inquiry system, the web inquiry system if you have any questions about any file. They also use that to come back to you and ask you for updating files or sending in additional documents. Well, they noticed that there were 777 cases over a specific time period that were lost. And the reason they were lost was somebody made a programming change to do something to improve the program, and it failed. They didn't anticipate what was happening. They lost seven. They knew how many they lost. The bad news is they didn't know what they were or who they were. Okay. So in that 777, there were probably hundreds of people hundreds of inquiries that had been responded to, and were told, send in additional documents, send in your passport, whatever. So the clients never got them. And even more disturbing was when, in the internal memos, as they were talking about this problem and what caused it and what happened, everything was about how it affected the processing for the officers looking at things, or for the files they're processing. There was no discussion on how this impacted applicants. Okay, they were just concerned with fixing it so that it didn't happen again, but not on how do you protect applicants from this. So the lesson here is, many of our members would have seen problems with files. They get refusals because you get a letter saying you did not respond to this PF procedural fairness request. Okay, and they said, but I did, or I didn't even get that request. And you know how old that gets. Well, I didn't get the email, right? The dog ate my homework. What you have to do is make sure that you are keeping on top of your applications. And whenever you see a problem, and we have seen problems with the rep portal over and over and over again, with the permanent residence portal, with the spousal portals, we've seen all kinds of problems continuously within their system, which is a symptom of the chaos that they're operating under. Report them right away. Send in every report, okay? Because sometimes they don't know about this until they get the complaints. All right. A couple more quick things. Many of you who have business clients may have noticed that they're getting audit requests. And it's not that big a deal, because they're basically asking that you attest to the fact that people are doing the job that they were supposed to be doing, and that they're getting paid for doing that job. And they have other little requests about make sure, did you advise the employee that this is a safe place to work, and what to do? And well, when you're the owner of the business, it seems kind of funny answering those questions, but that isn't really the big deal. Every single time one of our clients have got this, they've called asking for help and they're in a panic, because the next 3 pages of the letter they get from IRCC is all about the punishments. And if you don't comply with this, here's what's going to happen. And here are you can go to jail for this and you can do that. I mean, they're scary letters. So we now have a new line of business, thank you IRCC, in helping people prepare. And you usually get like 3 weeks to send in your answers. Okay, now with the strike, it'll take longer, but it's a whole line of business. Okay, and make sure your clients are aware that this is normal. And they have a checklist that said you've been selected at random. Usually that's the case. Once in a while, it'll be for a specific reason. But there's a new line of business for you to work on. And there's something called the International Mobility Workers Unit. Anyone who is filing an application for a work permit for someone from a visa-exempt country. If your client is out of the country and you're pretty sure you got a good application, you can send it in to the IMWU. They will give you an opinion. If the opinion is positive, you attach that opinion to your application and you're going to get approved. And it's free, and they're doing this in about a week. Now, this used to be called the Temporary Foreign Worker Unit. It's now called the International Mobility Workers Unit. If you want to know the rules for that, just Google the IRCC go into the IRCC website and go into their search bar, which is the worst search engine in history of anyone, anywhere, anytime. Put in International Mobility Workers Unit, and it'll give you all the rules. Okay. I don't know if all of us who deal with Google and all kinds of other searches, it's really great if you miss a letter, miss a line. IRCC, if you don't get that title right on the line, you can't find anything. Or you get 500 responses that have only partial deal with them. Okay, so that's sort of the latest of the updates. And I want to spend enough time on those because we all have an obligation to be competent to deal with our clients, and that obligation includes being on top of things. Okay, you must be up to date. If you're filing a C11 application for somebody who wants to open up a franchise operation, you're wrong, and you have not met the condition in our code of conduct of being able to file a case. Okay, and you could be liable to a complaint and discipline. So make sure you know what you're doing. Okay, and stay up to date on as many things as you can. And sometimes being up to date means you get new business opportunities. Okay, so let's take a breath. Let's talk a bit about business immigration. Everything you need to know about how to deal with business immigration is on this one slide. Okay, everybody's got their magnifying glasses out and they're all printing screen, etc. This is basically a flow chart saying, okay, what happens when the phone rings and somebody says, I want to come to Canada? And that's all they tell you, which can happen a lot. And the longer you're in practice, the better a job you do for your clients, you're going to get more and more of these calls. The fact that you've been doing spousals for your entire career, and you're really, really good at it, doesn't mean you're not going to get calls for people, and your clients are going to recommend you for anything to do with immigration. So business immigration can start like that because you get an inquiry from someone saying, I want to come to Canada. You take them through the regular questions. You find out, what do they know and what do they do? And again, you find out they've got a PhD, they're English and they're fully bilingual, and they've got a lot of money, but they're 47. Okay. Which means 340 points, maybe 400 points maximum on express entry, never get selected. So now you have to say, geez, I got this client, they've got money, what else can I do for them? Well, we'll get into this a little bit in the co-counseling part as well. But what you do is you start with a client inquiry, and I know I hear from a lot of people, they don't want to waste time going into and dealing with people who really are not qualified. So the first thing you should think about when you get these inquiries is, how do I disqualify this person? Sounds funny, right? I got somebody here who might buy from me, and I'm gonna find out a way to say no. Well, this is how you use your time productively. And to get the information you need, especially when it involves business immigration, you need to send them a questionnaire, right? Don't sell them on your services, sell them on a questionnaire. Otherwise, you're going to spend hours and hours and hours on the phone. Now, if you have the time, I'm all for talking to clients. My philosophy has always been, I never charge for consultations. I don't charge people if they call me, ask me for help. Other consultants, if they need help on on something that I don't have to do a lot of work on, okay, I can give them my opinion. But I'm happy, with the productivity tool I'm suggesting is have your own questionnaire that helps people and helps you disqualify them. Ask on a questionnaire, you can ask about medical background, you can ask about criminal history, and if they answer those questions on the positive. You ask if they've been refused visas to Canada, because you have to deal with those issues if you're going to apply with anything later. Okay, so you send out a questionnaire, and that on the stop means they're not going to be qualified for anything. You thank them. You should at that point in time have spent enough time to sell them on your abilities and professionalism so they will refer other people to you. That's how you get paid for people who aren't your customers. They become referral sources, and they're excellent sources of referral. Okay, so if yes, you then invite them to a consultation. Luckily these days, again, with Zoom and all the other team and Google Meet and all these things, you can have them on book a 1-hour consultation. Whether you charge for it or not is up to you, but you book a consultation. So now you can go into the details that the questionnaire didn't go into to see what they really want. Okay. Then if you find out that, again, what they really want is they got $15 million, they just want to come to Canada, they want to buy citizenship in Canada, and they would like it in a year. Well, they're not getting it. Okay. So that's a no. If it's a yes, now you have to figure out which program. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about, okay, when do you start charging money for this? Okay. But let's just look at the process. So if you take a look at the options to them, our obligation as authorized representatives is to give them the best, simplest option. We can't direct them to the most expensive program just because we want to make more money. That is unethical. Okay. So at the same time, how do you know which option is best for them if you don't know about all the options? Well, this slide helps you figure out which way to go. So for example, almost the best option for everybody, because it's the fastest PR option, is express entry. You find out do their CRS points. If they qualify under FSWP or federal skilled trades or federal skilled worker or PNP, should be CEC there, through CEC, then, and the answer is yes, take them through the process. All right, you're done. If they don't qualify, then take them to the temporary to permanent. There are many pathways to permanent residence that start with a work permit or a job offer or a study permit. Okay. Now, again, I've seen people and consultants taking clients who are 53 years old and saying, well, the only option for you is to get a study permit and come and get your 3rd degree in Canada, and then you get a work permit, and then you can apply for permanent residence under CEC. We have to be realistic here. Okay. They're getting, although they're issuing study permits literally like they're made of water, they're not issuing study permits to people where it makes no sense. All right. You need anyway, but we won't get into the details of study permit, but those are all pathways. And that if you got 300 or 480 points or 460 points and these people are in a skilled position and they can get a job offer, great. Again, to anyone new out there or anybody who's only been around a year or two, don't try to find jobs for people. The rules now on recruiting are really, really tough. The second thing is that's an area that is absolutely fraught with fraud, and we've all seen it, where people are paying for job offers and up to $50,000 in some countries. That's not anything you want to be involved in. But for a legitimate person who's wants to come to Canada and has close to the required points and needs the extra 50 points, do that. And if they're, instead of just being in a regular job, if what they really need is 200 points then or more, then you look at the business immigration or PNP. Don't forget that a PNP nomination can give you 600 points, right? And it's an automatic. So you look into the temporary foreign worker for each of the provinces, just know the rules. It's not like you have to learn 12 sets of rules. They're almost all the same. And know that a program through any of the provinces, A, is quota dependent, and B, can be changed at any time by the province if they don't like it, which can leave your clients out in a lurch. So just be aware of that. Once you're into the business immigration side, now you can talk about self-employed through C10 or LMIA. You can talk about the startup visa, Treaty investors are a growing area because now we have about 30 countries that treaty investors are eligible for. We'll put in owner-operator LMIA, just don't call it that. ICT through C62 or 30, the new LMI exempt codes. 62 is for senior managers, 63 is for specialized knowledge, and 61 is for startup. There's a startup ICT. The rules are right there on the website, and significant benefit. So those are the programs that you're now going to start talking to them. And if there's a no with those programs, then we move you over to the PNP options. What's confusing about business immigration is so many of the programs are PNP. But you have to realize that those programs came in when the government shut down entrepreneur program for Canada. They shut down a lot of the C10 and C11 applications. They simply weren't approving them. So the provinces came in with their own programs. Most of these provinces are on their third or fourth iteration of the programs. Several times, most of them were actually shut down by the federal government because there was too much fraud. So they've all got programs with a lot of requirements. But we typically would take the people right over to that section if their language ability is CLB 4 or 5, or 6, and they're not getting to CLB 7. We'll take them to the PNPs because a lot of them have CLB 5 or even CLB 4 requirements. And if you can't do CLB 7, you're not getting into express entry. Okay, so that's sort of the way we do it. So this is the business immigration part in total. It's sort of how do you logically take the person who calls you and said, I want to come to Canada, how do you take them to one of these processes? Okay, and these are almost by preference. These on the left are the ones that are easiest. In the middle are the ones that are practical. And the rules for all of these programs are much easier to deal with than the provincial programs. And you can count on the fact that the processes won't be changed in the one, sometimes year, even longer time it takes you to get everything up and running. Okay, so there's the business flowchart. Some conditions. You need to know some things right away from business immigration clients. Where? Canada's a huge country. In order to pick a proper business, you're going to have to be able to narrow it down to an area where you can bring in expertise that helps them find a business. What type of business? Okay, again, I've had people say any kind of business. Well, I usually tell those people, you can't tell me what kind of business, you can't come to Canada. All right, now we do help them, and there's lots of ways you can help them in finding a business. You're certainly not and should never recommend a business to them, nor should you assure them that one type of business is going to be profitable and yet another won't. You're not engaged to give them business advice, and you run the risk of running afoul of securities regulators if you're actually involved in selling of a business. Okay, not just to say a conflict of interest. And if they're not a startup, are they prepared to engage the services of a business broker to find a suitable opportunity? The reason you say that is, think of yourself as a visa officer looking at an application for C10 or for ICT even, and they've taken a look at this business, and they see that you've never been in Canada in your life. All right. And they don't see any evidence as to how you found that, but there's a business you're going to come in and invest $300,000 in. Well, no visa officer is going to approve that. Okay. They know that this is just a scheme. And again, they're on the lookout for schemes of people just trying to come to Canada, to get permanent residence so then they can get rid of their business. Okay. Now, this is about the area, the first three parts, that we will go out of our way to give prospective business immigration clients lots and lots and lots of information. You don't have to worry, by the way, of them doing the file themselves. The processes are far too complex for them to do it themselves. It's not a study permit. It's not a work permit. It can include all of those things, but it's not. Okay. So again, this is about the time when you say, I'm giving you the information, then I'm sending you a retainer, a service agreement. We have to call them service agreements now. We're sending you a service agreement that will outline all of the costs for you. Okay. If you are then interested in moving forward and you start to ask us questions like, well, what about this business? Or what about that business? Or what do I have to do to qualify? That's immigration advice. And for that, we need to be retained. And here is the deposit, and here is the payment schedule. And getting a retainer, all right, even if the first step is get a visitor visa and then go on to whatever business program you're going to, make sure your deposit is a significant amount so that they know that they're serious. And if it is a serious business client, asking deposits of $5,000 and $10,000 is not out of the line at all. Just make sure it, and we'll talk about this under ethics, goes into your trust account. Okay. Then after they've done that, here are some of the issues. Make sure they've got liquid assets. Some countries, it's really hard to get money out. So if they want to buy a business in Canada worth X amount of money and they can't bring in the down payment, okay, that's a problem. Does the business concept make sense for the intended province? I'm sorry, I always have to pick on Saskatchewan because, well, I can't. I grew up in Saskatchewan. But, if somebody's coming in and what they're going to do is grow roses or flowers in Saskatchewan for resale, not such a good idea. The growing season's far too short. Okay. Or if they want to go farming in Saskatchewan, they've heard Saskatchewan's easier to get into and they have lots of farms there. And what you've got is somebody that's been farming, 1.5 acres, have a mixed farming, and they want to come in and open a farm in Saskatchewan without realizing that Saskatchewan measures farms in square hectares, and a lot of them. Okay, that's a farm. Okay, does it match their experience? No matter which application you're putting in for anything, a visa officer has the obligation to make sure that the individual can do the work. If you've been a teacher your whole life, if your client's been a teacher their whole life, and now they've got money and they want to come and they've got $1 million to invest, they're not getting a work permit to run a business because they have no business experience. So make sure your client has that. They don't have to have the detailed experience of a specific business, because being a business manager, knowing how to hire people, fire people, do strategic planning, put an organization together, manage capital, those are business management skills. And they can get those through being a senior manager in a company or running their own business. Okay. Do they have the intent and ability to work in the day-to-day management? They have to be involved in the business. People will always ask, and you've got huge numbers of people who have a lot of money, want to buy their way into Canada, which they could have done under the Quebec program or the previous investor program. That doesn't work anymore. And if someone says to you, I don't care, I'll do any business, I just want to come to Canada, tell them that's great, you can't help them. Okay? Because you're going to end up with nothing but trouble. Are they prepared to live in a small town? Again, people, a lot of people, I've had people from cities that are 10 and 12 million people and 20 million people, saying, yeah, I'm setting up my business in Morden, Manitoba, and it's a retail business, and there's 32,000 people within 100 kilometers of Morden, Manitoba or something. It doesn't matter what they do. They're never going to get enough people by it. Okay. So just make sure of all these things. And if they have an idea on processing time, that's really important for business immigration, because once they make a decision on a business, they want to know how soon can they be operating that business, especially if they buy it ahead of time. Well, there are some programs. If you're trying to do this for the OINP program and it's going to take you 1.5 years to be able to get a work permit, your business isn't going to be around in 1.5 years. So be sure you match their desire with the right business program. Okay. Now, a couple of quick things to help you about. We'll talk about co-counseling, and I know I'm running short on time, so we'll go through this fairly quickly. I'll just try to answer the questions. Again, people say, I just want to come to Canada. Well, you're obligated under our code of conduct to refuse to help them if you don't have the skills, or you must co-counsel. That's in section 20 of our code of conduct. Okay. They contact you because of your good work. So you spent all this time becoming an immigration consultant. You've gone to school. You've taken time away from your family. You've invested money to get your practice up and running. You're working really hard for your clients. You're doing a good job for them. And somebody calls you and says, I want to come to Canada. Well, and it's because they've been referred to you, which is that's a golden prospect, right? Referrals are absolutely fantastic in our business. And so you've got the referral, and the only problem is they need something that you can't give them. Well, co-counseling helps you monetize your goodwill and maximize your profits from promotional efforts. Okay. So basically it says, if I can only get some help, I know how to do a work permit, I know how to do study permit, but I know most of the rules. I can read the rules on an ICT, but I have no confidence that I know how to do everything. That's where co-counseling can help you. Okay. Meaning that you can get the money that the clients are offering you. And this is, you can read section 20. Those are the obligations under the co-counseling. And it tells you, in terms of the arrangement, your name, for example, a co-counsel's name must be on the retainer agreement, but they don't have to sign it. The retainer agreement or service agreement is between you and the client, and only your name is on the 5476. You're the client. When you do co-counseling, you want to keep the client. You worked hard to bring them in. You don't want to have to then turn them over to somebody else who's going to get all the benefits from them and the people who they refer to in the future. Okay. And if you read these requirements, it helps answer some of the questions about, well, how do I set this up? Okay. Now, some things that are different. CICC now has a mentoring program. It is not the same as co-counseling. Okay. The mentoring program is about practice advice. Co-counseling is about a specific immigration process. Co-counseling is voluntary versus mandatory for new members under CICC. Co-counseling available to all authorized representatives. Okay, that includes lawyers and RCICs. There's a difference for lawyers in that we can't share, or our names don't go on the consulting agreement, and lawyers can't co-counsel with consultants, but consultants can be, and especially under the co-counseling rules, consultants can be suppliers of information to the lawyer, just like an expert witness is, or other resources that a lawyer can use. Okay, it's also, co-counseling can continue on and on, no matter how long the client takes. Whereas mentoring is, I think it's refined to the first year. The other part of mentoring, which I'm not comfortable with, is the mentor must report to to CICC. Too many C's. CICC if the new RCIC is not meeting the requirements of the program. So you basically have to police people under a mentoring program with co-counseling. That's not it. So we have MC3 is basically Immigration Consultants Co-Counseling Collaborative. And that's a company set up with myself and Peter Veres. And we now have a group of people who can co-counsel on a number of different areas. We keep it simple. There is no agreement. There's no contract. It's just a handshake. We all have the same code of ethics. And so we're all under the same regulators, so we can trust each other. And trust is absolutely necessary. It needs to be a win-win financially for both parties. All right. No senior counsel is going to keep doing this and spending their time if they aren't going to get paid. And no new counsel is going to basically just turn over business to someone else to make all the money. The goal is actually education. I tell everyone who wants to co-counsel that here's what we charge for the first file. Here's what we charge for the next files. And when you don't need us anymore, great. You can do it all on your own. The purpose is for you to learn. Client always belongs to the junior counsel. Again, that's how you get paid for your good work. Okay. Senior counsel is fully involved in the file. People say, well, what part do you do and what part do I do? You share everything about the file. All right. And when it comes to, by the way, the liabilities, it doesn't matter who's done what in that file. In a business immigrant file especially, they're going to sue everybody. And I don't care what's in your retainer agreement. Okay. They're only as good as whatever the client says. They don't. You can take your retainer agreements. If something goes wrong, they will take all of that to a lawyer, and the lawyer will always find some reason to sue you. Okay. It just doesn't matter. How do we share fees? We normally say, okay, it's 50-50 on the first file, 50-50 of the professional fees only. If you provide other services to your clients like translation, settlement services, that's fine. That's your money. But on the professional fees that we identify up front in the service agreement, we share those 50-50 on the first case, and then we take 20% on the second case, and the third case and fourth case, depending on how long you need us around. Now, there will be some programs like H&C or refugees that those ratios can vary, but the idea is let's make sure that while you're undergoing the full learning curve, we're both sharing in the file, and after that, we take a much lower rate, but we still stay involved the whole way. I now have clients out there where I have something like we're on our 20th or 25th case. These are with very busy consultants who want that assurance. Okay. We have them available for everyone, all levels of client evaluation. One of the key principles we operate on is we have templates for everything. We've got all of the submission letters, service agreements, reconsideration requests, compliance audits, required document list, questionnaires. We provide all of those things depending on the case. We'll have a catalog. We'll share with you of relevant court cases that we can use in our submission letters. We will suggest fees. You set the fee. It isn't us. We do not set fees. We just give you a list of here's what others are charging for these kinds of services. You can decide to charge more or less. Okay. I hesitate to say less because I will never ever drop a price, and I hope you never will. But that's a different seminar. We have newsletters by lines of business. We share every couple of months. We put a newsletter like on business immigration, and we're expanding that now. So you'll get the latest updates like we've been talking about. We're just about finished our website. Also, my associate Peter, if you get all of a sudden you got a case with 100 applications for work permits, and you need help processing, you only have one employee. Well, Peter has a large staff, and all the facilities he can actually contract process for you. My name and Peter's name, that's how you contact us. The one rule I only ask that you follow is you don't contact us when you want to learn about co-counseling. You contact us when you have a client. Okay? And that's a very practical reason. I could talk to you forever, and you can take courses forever on how to deal with business immigration and ICTs, etc. You'll only learn by doing. Okay? So to make the time valuable and beneficial to you, we need a customer. Now, it doesn't have to be a customer who's already paid you. It's a prospect. When you have a prospect and it's in an area you don't feel comfortable doing, call us. We'll assign a co-counsel and you'll work together. If you don't get the client, you get the next one, and you'll learn. Okay. Finally, this is a kind of a cool slide. If you want to know how to make money in immigration and do less work, it's sort of like figure out how to do this. These areas of immigration are ranked by revenue per transaction. Yes, business immigration cases, total costs for a normal business immigration case can be $25,000 to $50,000 in professional, and maybe half of that, a bunch of that's professional fees. Others are filing fees, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. At the same time, the amount of time and energy to do a business file is much higher than any other. Okay. And if you take a look at who's doing these files, well, 90% of all RCICs and people doing them on their own do general immigration. In fact, 90% of all temporary resident files are done by non-consultants, meaning individuals themselves. They're our biggest competitor. Same thing with general permanent immigration. 80% of them are done by people who don't use a representative at all. Once you get into more complicated cases, it becomes very high proportion of these are represented. So labor, meaning work permits, ICTs, that sort of thing. Students are done by 65%. Now you get into tribunals, removals, and appeals. All of these three need special licensing for immigration consultants. Lawyers can do all of them. But you can tell they take a lot more work. Agencies, everything else take a lot more work than general immigration, but the business immigration is still the biggest amount of work for the most amount of money. Okay, and again, it just gives you an idea. Everyone starts with one area and they start to get good at it, and that's very important. But when you get the opportunity to do one of these other areas, and you want to learn to become, to be competent in those areas, co-counseling is an excellent way to go. Real quick on some ethical practices. I'll give you a simple phrase, and basically it's money causes most ethical problems. Okay, or maybe I should say the lack of money. Money problems create ethical dilemmas, and you could take a look at some of these tips, etc. The answer here normally is when you have you get a client sends you money. My recommendation is you put all of that into your trust account under the it's on the next slide, section 1, capital. Okay, RCIC should trust account model 1. Okay, and I recommend you do that because under our regulatory regime, you must deposit into your trust account monies that are not earned. Well, when you get a check from a client and you have bills to pay, how are you going to determine whether you've earned that money or not? Okay, you might have, like in business immigration, you ask for a deposit of $5,000. You get that before, right away, and you haven't done anything. Well, for sure, all that money goes into Model 1. But what if you assign an overhead cost to every single one of your files? Well, you could say you get the check in for $5,000, $1,000 going to my overhead, and you only deposit $4 in your trust account. The problem is, how do you justify any of that? So my answer is put everything in your trust account. okay? Then withdraw from it as you need it, okay? You can take out your overhead costs right away. If your retainer agreement or service agreement is set up to pay by milestones, as soon as you reach a milestone, you take the money out. In co-counseling, you share half your fees with me. I'll send you an invoice as soon as you get the money from your client. I'll send you an invoice. You take it out. That's justifiable. Okay, that's an expense that you can justify. All right, it's up to me to justify what I've done in case there's an issue down the road. Okay, so excuse me. The problem that happens, and by preserving capital, what I mean is, you have your monthly expenses you cannot avoid to stay in practice. You need to have at least a 6-month reserve. All right, a 6-month reserve of your monthly costs, because if you don't, okay, then you're going to end up stopping doing business one way or another. And by 6 months, what you try to do is say, okay, I know that I need to take out this kind of money from myself. I need to pay my staff. I need to pay my rent, my phone bill, whatever those are. And I have money in the bank. I can borrow against something. You know, I know I can always go to my parents for money. That would have been nice in my time. You could do whatever, as long as you know you have that money in case. If you drop below the 6-month level, cut costs now. Don't wait until you run out of money. Okay. And the best thing I can do is give you an example of and this usually happens when you get really busy and you have to expand your operation. So you invest in your business, you add a couple of people on, and you're processing files, and the money's coming in, and then all of a sudden money stops. So you're sitting there and you've got your cash account is going down to zero and you can't borrow anymore, but you're getting filing fees in because you just got 10 work permit applications and you're starting to work on those, and they sent you in the filing fees and they're all in your trust account. All right, and there's many thousands of dollars in your trust account, and you're operating your business and you're running out of cash, and the next thing you know, you can't pay your phone bill. Okay, well, if you don't pay your phone bill, you're out of business, right? Or you can't pay the rent on your office and you can't move quickly, you're out of business. So you go, well, darn, I got $35,000 in my trust account. I haven't earned it yet, but I know these files are going to pay because I'm already working on them. And I know in 15 days, 30 days, 45 days, I'm going to have the money, right? So you take the money out of your trust account, you pay the bill, you're right, you stay in operation. Then you do the work on the files, you're getting ready to file, and the client doesn't send you the money on time. And you're sitting there with a file finished, and you can't file it because you don't have the filing fees. Now you're into an ethical conundrum. So the answer to ethics is to be prepared. To operate ethically, make sure you keep sufficient funds in your account. When you have funds, make sure you stay current with all your changes. That's what we've been talking about in the up-to-dates. Keep your clients fully informed. If you have a problem with a file, tell them. That's the best way. If you get a refusal letter, tell them right away. Don't hide it and think you can resolve it. All right? Admit mistakes when they happen. I get lots of referrals from people over the years when we started out on their file and IRCC made a really bad decision. Okay, and rather than blame me because I've kept them fully informed, they send me more clients. Right, and I do my best to work on solutions for them. I've never charged for resubmitting a file if there was a mistake made. And sometimes when you're filing hundreds and hundreds of files, you'll make mistakes. And if you miss a deadline, it can be a serious mistake. Make sure you inform our insurance people. By the way, informing your errors and omissions insurance is for your protection, not your clients, right? So you have to inform them if you know there's a problem. So sorry I had to rush through this, but we are coming to the end, and I'd like to answer any of the questions that we haven't answered. Please feel free to contact us by email. Again, if you're going to request co-counseling, make sure that you have a client. That's all we ask. And then we'll take you through from there. All right. And the individuals we have working with us, these are all subject matter experts on refugees, on spousals, on LMIAs. It really is important that you learn how to do it right, number one. And number two, it's very important that you take advantage of the goodwill and the hard work you've done and the sacrifices you made to open your practice, that you get paid. Okay. And by co-counseling is a way you can get paid. So sorry, Marianella, I know I'm over time. It's now 3 minutes. Oh, it's
Yes.
1:15. Yeah,
I was gonna
I'm
ask
way
you,
over
Phil, you
time.
need to
So, but
leave, right? You have a
well,
hard stop,
I got
correct?
another 10 or 15 minutes. I'll just skip lunch,
Ah,
but I
okay,
definitely
great.
have to have a hard stop in 15 minutes at the most.
Okay,
Um,
perfect, Phil.
if I'm much longer than that, I'll have a lot of time on my hands because I'll be single. Okay.
We won't want that with Gabrielle. Let me just share some of the questions that we have, Phil, and then we'll let you go. But it has been amazing. It has been the most complete business immigration summary ever. I can tell you that. So let's start with the questions.
Thank you.
Before starting co-counseling, would you help with the assessment of the client's eligibility?
Well, yes. I mean, starting co-counseling isn't when you start talking. It's when money changes hands. Okay, but as you know, in the business side of this, the first thing we want to do is qualify the client, right? And sometimes you don't know how to qualify a business client. So of course, you call us. We ask that you can tell us what you need to tell us about the client, but then we'll ask to send a questionnaire right away. Okay. Once we get the questionnaire, we're already co-counseling with you. There's just no money changing hands. And by the way, maybe half of the requests we get in, we don't hear anything right away from either the client and sometimes or from the rep, because the clients take their time, or the clients, after they fill in the questionnaire, life changes, or they find somebody else. So yes, co-counseling starts as soon as you call us, but there's no fee obligation until the client sends you money. Sends you the money.
Wonderful. That's very convenient. We have another question. Besides co-counseling, do you also provide a one-time application review service?
The answer to that is no.
Okay.
Number one, if you don't have confidence in doing the application, you shouldn't start doing the application. Okay. This is not a service where we're going to prevent mistakes that you made when you took on a client you shouldn't have taken. And to be frank, anyone who is asking to have their submission reviewed as just a one-off, has already violated the code of conduct, because they should never have taken the file if they didn't know it was going to work. Now, I'll be honest with you. People call me with specific questions on specific issues while they're preparing a file. I'm happy to answer those questions anytime. All right. And it happens. Okay. We all need help. If you go on, by the way, go on to the listserv, the KPIC listserv. You can ask all those questions of experienced people, and they're great resources for you. All right. But if it comes to somebody saying, can you just this sounds like, I've had that asked by clients all the time. Can you just review my application? I've done it all myself, and I'm sure I'm right. Never take those. Never. Because you're liable, fully liable, and you'll usually take $100 or $200, whatever. You're fully liable. Don't do it. Okay. And no, you can't do that with co-counseling either. Co-counseling is when you admit at the start you don't know how to finish this file, but you want to. Then you call for co-counseling.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. We have a question that was originally sent with the registration. It says, what is the current refusal rate for owner-operator LMIA applications?
And another one, how high is high? We don't know. What I can tell you is applications that we co-counsel on and submit, all right, we never have a refusal because of any justifiable reason. We have had trouble with the SDC officers refusing a file for wrong reasons, just like you have IRCC can refuse a file for the wrong reasons, and we fight. We have really good contacts with good lawyers who know how to fight, and nothing is guaranteed, but I can almost guarantee you that if you do it right from the start and you have high standards, you're not taking borderline cases, your refusal rate will go to zero quickly. Other than the government doing it because they, Chinook got involved or something.
Okay. I'm skipping through some questions because you've already answered them, Phil, and some of them are maybe too specific, so I would encourage people to reach out directly to Phil for those. I have one that is specific, but it may also give insights to other consultants and lawyers. So our client arrived in Canada under the C11 program as his company owner and general manager 2 years ago. He holds 100% of the company shares. If he wants to apply for an LMIA, do we need to advertise the position?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you can do it two ways.
Point.
Okay, remember, you can do it two ways. You can do it with advertising and without, and I would recommend doing them both. Okay. Only to avoid an ESTC officer saying, I don't like this. All right. They have no legal justification for not liking it, but you don't want to put your client in a fight if you don't have to. So the tool to use is to make sure that you're putting in the application and you advertise on the job bank and you're advertising it with and without the investment requirement. Okay.
Okay. Another question. So you cannot co-counsel with lawyers, but provide only information as a consultant. Will the fee sharing structure and assistance on the file be the same?
Yes. And the answer is yes, we co-counsel with lawyers all the time. I honestly have to say more than a dozen lawyers that I co-counsel with. There is no difference in how we actually work together. It's just that I can't be on the service agreement that the lawyer gives to the client, and the lawyer has to abide by their codes, but they're very similar. And the fees, if the lawyer came to me and said, I want you to be an expert witness, what do you charge? I would tell them the same thing. If the lawyer wants my help on a business immigration file, I let them know it's 50% of the fees you charge the client. Okay. And the lawyer is perfectly capable of saying, yes, I will pay you that money. Right. So there's really no difference. It works identical. In fact, I have a hard time. I have to try to remember, am I dealing with a lawyer or a consultant when we're partway through the file? Because frankly, all the work is the same and the relationship is the same.
Wonderful. Will an individual proprietor of a business qualify for an ICT?
Okay, well, that's a question that requires a bit of an answer. If an individual owns 100% of a company or outside of Canada, there's two different levels here. Are you asking about sole proprietorship versus incorporation? If that's the question, the answer is incorporate in Canada. In some countries, a sole proprietorship, like India, can actually be the same as a Canadian corporation. But if the issue is that an individual owns 100% of the business offshore, can they own 100% of the business in Canada? Absolutely. That's a good ICT. There is an ownership and control relationship between the two companies. And I should have mentioned business immigration, business plans, Marianne, I'm really sorry. I meant to say that when you do a business plan, the tips are, it's about the business. It's not about individuals. No business plan should be a submission letter. So you would never in a business plan include the name of a person or put on the title, it's in support of an ICT application, or talk about individual people in a business plan. I've done business plans in the corporate world for years, and I was a business planner for a little while. When you do that, it's all about the company. It's about the SWOT analysis. It's about the market research. It's about the financial projections. Okay, so first of all, make the business plan about the business, not about immigration. You shouldn't have any words in there that refer to immigration. Okay, and secondly, if you're going to do a business plan, they should be optimistic. You have to put a business plan together as if you're going to the bank to borrow money. And any of us who've ever gone to a bank to borrow money knows that you always put your best foot forward. And the other side of it is, from a management point of view, I want to see a business plan that's a stretch. If I have people working for me running their divisions, I wanted to see a stretch objective. I didn't want somebody to come in and saying, well, I'm pretty pessimistic about the year. We're going to do 1%. I would basically say, good. And by the way, how can I help you with your next job? That's sort of, you need stretch objectives. So make sure that the profit margin, and IRCC officers are not business planners or they don't have degrees in accounting, but they do get to see a lot of projections. And if they see a plan that says you're making 1.5% in year 3, now you might have been perfectly honest about your expectations, but if they see that, they're going to say, wait a minute, you can put money in a bank for less. You don't have to invest the money. You can just put it in a bank. It'll be safe. You don't have to risk anything. So that's my recommendation on business plans. They're not immigration documents. They are absolutely essential to the immigration process. absolutely essential nowadays, and officers appreciate them. And you can refer when you do your cover letter, you can refer to sections of the business plan instead of writing a lot of verbiage. Okay, you can force the officer to look at your business plan. The old story is, and I've seen this in immigration in the past, you put your application together, it's this big, things look really good. Your cover letter's on top, and it's 4 pages of absolute legalese. I've seen these things go into a visa office. The first thing that the receptionists, if you will, do is they strip out all of the dividers and all of the color coding and all the nice, pretty stuff you packaged it in, and they strip it all out, put a package around it. It goes to R10. They look and see if you paid it, strip it out, sits on a visa officer's desk. He'll go get it. He'll take your cover letter and put it at the bottom. He'll take any other printed materials that look like support materials. He'll put it at the bottom. He's going to go in there and he's going to look at the application form and look at the details. And if he approves it, he doesn't have to look at all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
He's just done his job efficiently. But if the information, if he has to start to have doubts, now you want to make sure it's well organized. You go back to the cover letter, he'll start to look. And if it says see section 12 in the business plan, he'll go look at it. Okay. So that's how you put your files together. And you don't know which officer is doing it. Some officers are absolute detailed, they will look at everything. Same thing when you go to the border. I've seen CBSA officers just want to look at the top page and issue a work permit. Other ones take it back, and 3 hours later they come back. Of course, they've had an extra coffee and a few more lunches, but they'll come back and tell you, ask detailed questions. So our job is to prepare the application for the worst possible case, but recognize that if a visa officer sees on a plan in support of an ICT application, they go, they made this up, right? And all the money is spent on it, or what you tried to do with it, it's useless now. And you have a credibility problem. So again, my recommendation: Joorney does an excellent job. They've been really good at developing their plans, with that in mind. And they don't want to be in a position of giving immigration advice. So don't ask them to say, I'm doing an ICT. What should I put in my business plan? If you don't know,
that's why we brought you, Phil. That's why we invited you, Phil.
I mean, and if you don't have your business plan for your own business, go learn how to do one and do it for yourself. All right, and you'll recognize what a business plan is. Right, Marianelle?
Thank you for that, Phil. We really appreciate your support, and we're so happy to work with you on so many cases. And for us, it's very important that we always stay neutral on the immigration side, on the legal side. So that's the main reason why we love to bring guests such as yourself to explain to people the options of co-counseling as well. If they don't have the knowledge, if they don't have the experience, they can go to you, to your company, you and Peter. And for us, it's better because the applicant is going to be happier. They will have more chances of getting a better consultation. And also on our side, we're going to do more business plans because people will feel more confident if they're co-counseling rather than wanting to take a case that they don't have experience on. So we're very happy to have you here, Phil. We don't want to take more time because we know you have other activities, but we will send you all the questions for some of the specific ones that maybe we didn't illustrate here. So we will send you that information so that those can be answered. But to be honest, looking at the majority of them, they were all answered. So that is great.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Marianella. Appreciate it. And to everyone out there, this is a terrific business. My last closing statement is, I was in the corporate world for 30 years, and we sold cleaning chemicals to help people, make sure the dishes they ate off of were safe or the laundry was clean. When we got into immigration, I realized that this is an incredible business. We're in the business of helping people come to Canada. We all love this country. We think this is a great country, and we actually have the ability to affect how Canada develops, and it's an awesome responsibility for the country that we have that authority or that power to help people do that. And for all of those individuals who are coming to Canada because they want something, they want an opportunity, they want a better life, they want safety, they want security, we're helping them basically make the biggest decision of their lives. So this is a great business to be in, and I'm every day I keep thinking, how else can you be? What other business could be as rewarding? I mean, okay, a doctor saves people's lives. That's great. Politicians make everybody angry. That's not so great. But in our business, it'd be great. I honestly can tell you, clients have been so appreciative, and we all have them. They show their appreciation. I've had some name their kids after me. God forbid.
Oh my
It's
God,
a great business. So be proud of what you do. Be proud of what you do, and be mindful of doing, what's best for them, and that'll be what's best for you. Anyway, thanks again, Marianella.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for that closing statement, because it really reminds us of how much we share our values too. So thank you once again, Phil, for being our guest today. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. Bye. See you
Bye, everybody.
soon.